After the Eichot describes the pain, all of the horrendous retribution that came to Klal Yisrael, the suffering on a communal level, individual level. Perek Gimel there's a posuk, Zocho Tisko Zeshuch Olai Nafshi. I remembered, and there was some kind of an appeasement, a relaxation. So Sosheva Libi Al Kein Oichel. I'll return this to my heart, and I will yet be hopeful. Chaste Hashem, what will I return to my heart? Chaste Hashem ki lo somnu, ki lo yicholu rachamov. Ben Shalom's chesed doesn't end, nor his rachamim. Chadoshim labkom rabba munasecha. There's a renewal. The world is in flux, things change. Chadoshim labkorim, the renewal. Chazal say it's bokron shel malchios, the flashing, the appearing of a new kingdom, a new dynasty. One nation conquers the other. The former nation that enslaved the Jews, persecuted the Jews, suddenly they disappear and a new nation appears. So, sometimes that's a respite for Klal Yisrael. It's a chance to breathe. So Bokon Shel Malchus, the fact that it changes, there are these constant transitions, is in itself a kind of a kernel of hope, because the present situation won't necessarily last. Chelki Hashem Omra Nafshi. My portion is with the Rebbeinu Shalom. That's eternal. Al Kein Oichel Lo. Therefore, I will be hopeful. I will be optimistic. Tov Hashem lekovov lenefesh tidrishenu. The Rebbeinu Shalom will give good, treat with good those who are hopeful, those who connect. The nefesh tidrishenu, to that nefesh, that soul that seeks him out. Question is, over the years, many meforshim have spoken, many darshanim have spoken about what happened here. Where was the transition from the suffering, the pain, the anguish, the lamenting, to a sudden switch of optimism? It's a subdued optimism, but it's an optimism. We read in the Kriya today that Klal Yisrael very quickly into Eretz Yisrael, the success, the early years, David, Shlomo, but then already there are breaches in Shlomo's time. He marries Bas Paro. There are hints, clues of the impending disaster. Split of the Malchus, Klal Yisrael serving Avodah Zorah. One version, another version, the kingdoms competing with each other. Some faulted with actual rishus, others with naivete. But when the Avodah Zorah, the idolatry, becomes rampant, the remedy is Golus. They're sent out into Golus. When they're in Golus, Posuk says that we read, "Ubikashtem mishom es Hashem Elokecha, umatzasa ki sedoshena bechol levovecho." There's no description here in the psukim, Posuk that I just read, of what happened that they should seek the Ribbono Shel Olam. Just like here in Eicha, it's hard to pinpoint where's the turning point, where's the pivot? What happened and how did it happen? That suddenly optimism surfaces. Over there, the psukim we read in the Kriya, it's hard to understand. They were serving idolatry in Eretz Yisrael. They continue to serve idolatry in Chutz La'aretz. And then, unclear what happened. There's again a turning point. Ubikashtem mishom. You will seek from there the Ribbono Shel Olam. So the later psukim do say batzar lecha, that situation became tough in Chutz La'aretz. The Golus turned on them. Even that Golus, which is initially hospitable, at some point turns when Klal Yisrael betrays the gift of a breathing space. But still, it's hard to understand, Ubikashtem mishom es Hashem Elokecha, and the reason that's given, umatzasa, you will find. Why will you find? Because you're going to search for it. Ki sedoshena bechol levovecho. Ponovitch Arov cited the psukim that the Ikvasa de Mashiach, that the Klal Yisrael begins to search. They're searching, and they don't find. Navi testifies to the fact that they don't find. Yeshotetu ba'oretz v'lo yimtzu. That is listed as one of the famines in the Medrash, prime famines that attack Klal Yisrael in history. It's a rov lo lelechem v'tzomei lo lemayim el lishmo es dvar Hashem. Does say Yeshotetu ba'oretz v'lo yimtzu. They're not going to find. But the Ponovitch Arov asked, the etzem fact that they were searching and looking, isn't that a positive thing? How can that be lumped together, categorized with the other famines that were exclusively, purely negative? Here, at least there's some feature that is positive. It's for spirituality. Answered the Ponovitch Arov, anybody that's ever been exposed to a famine, lo aleinu, has witnessed that people rummage through the trash, pick up rinds, peels, chew on it as if it's providing nourishment. They're so hungry. That will be, said the Ponevezh Rav, the state of affairs in spirituality in Ikvus the Mashiach in the Messianic era. People will rummage through the klippas, the peels and rinds of spirituality, and chew on it as if it's providing nourishment. Like junk food, spiritual junk food. Fool the body, but you can't fool the body indefinitely. It fools the hunger syndrome, but it doesn't provide the nutrition, the nourishment. And so that will be, the Maisa is very meduyak, because this lotion over there in the Novi, Micha, is v'yeshotu ba'oretz. The Parsha read not long ago, Ba'aleischa, talks about them going in the midbar, v'yeshotu ba'midbar. Rashi says that l'loi omol, without any effort. They were drifting. That was the mile of the mon. It was provided, it landed very close by. There was a yardstick depending on the level of tzidkis, but close by. Didn't have to shop, plant, cultivate. It was there. Somebody that is looking for ruchnias, if it's a bechina, that category, comparable to v'yeshotu, drifting, spiritual window shopping, casually collecting positions, ideas, without any real commitment to buy, to purchase, without any commitment to make a kinyan, to acquire it, to internalize it. So then, it's v'lo yimtzu. They won't find. What we read today in the Parsha, Sukkim are teaching us a reason. Why umatzosa? Why do they find? He said, "Shena bechol avovacho." You will search with your entire heart. That's a preparedness to take the idea, let it take me by the hand and heart where it is going. I've told some of you, maybe the Rav remembers that Rav Neuberger Zatzal used to purchase automobiles from the Aberdeen Naval Base. They were Chevrolets, stick shift, no air conditioning, no radio, 300,000 miles on them, but they had an interesting feature. They had governors on the accelerator, which meant you couldn't go over 35 miles an hour, because there would be a Nisa Yichud to put a sailor in that car. If it could go over 35 miles an hour, he'd be tempted, have a Yetzirah to take it off the base. But if he can only go 35 miles an hour, no, he's not going to go on the highway with it. But when Rav Neuberger Zatzal purchased those cars, if you got it for $50 from the naval base, you're not going to spend $15 to take off the governor. So the yeshiva had a fleet of 350,000 mile Chevrolets with governors on the accelerators. There are people that enter into a program, there are people of studying, learning, searching, an odyssey, but they have governors on the accelerators. They don't want to go over 35 miles an hour. They yeshotu ba'ot. They yeshotu b'midbar. They casually drifting. They're not searching. Searching means with an openness, a passion to find that truth. Okay, so how does that happen? Because I'll give us the clues. We read today in the Haftarah that before the destruction, question was put to Chachomim, Nevi'im, then subsequently, as it's happening, while it's happening, after it happening, Amal of the odds. Why? How'd they lose this land? Klal Yisrael was in such a position of strength, politically, culturally, initially spiritually, and then that began to decline. The word spiritual by us in Gematria means halachadik. Consistency in taking an idea and translating it into performance. But there's one idea that's a very unique idea. It's not just behavioral. It encompasses the total man, the total human being. And the question is put to Chachomim, Nevoinim, Nevi'im. Nobody answers. Rebbeinu Shalom answers that Ozvom, they left, they abandoned my Torah. V'lo holchu bo. It didn't go in its way. That would seem to be a repetition. Ozvom is Terosi. So then it follows, lo holchu bo, didn't go in its way. Yimon Nedorim says something a bit hard to understand. What it's referring to is they did not make a brocha on Birkas HaTorah, of Birkas HaTorah, on learning Torah. Meforshim, as could be anticipated, Meforshim try and understand what's this talking about. Is that such an extraordinary and meaningful, every halacha? What seems to be minutiae can be world-shattering. But Klal Yisrael at this point, according to Chazal, had transgressed the three primary averas of idolatry, adultery, and murder. The three averas that one is required to give one's life for. So how can the Novi, how can Yirmiyahu say that, according to Chazal, that the Gemara Nedorim, that it's because they didn't make a prior blessing on Torah? It's a beautiful Alshich. The Alshich says, the Mahadav, to what is to be compared? It was a king, and he had an extraordinary violinist that was in his court who played on the most beautiful level. One by one, over a period of time, people come to tell the king, to inform on this violinist, however otherworldly his performances are, but he's a criminal. He's a vicious person. He killed people. He stole, he murdered, all kinds of crimes. And the king listens, but continues to pamper the violinist. Then one day the violinist loses an arm, he can no longer play, and now the king takes him to task for all of the prior crimes that he committed. And when asked to explain, the king explains that surely he was guilty, but I could not do without that beautiful melody. I could not do without his performance. Klal Yisrael were guilty of those crimes, the 3 cardinal sins. But as long as they were learning Torah, that was the melody, and that created a kind of a shield to protect them. As soon as they stopped learning Torah, then... But what does that mean, they stopped learning Torah? Chachomim were asked. Wise men, people who were supposedly, purportedly, apparently learned, were asked. They were fulfilling other mitzvahs. So we have the Bach, the Chassam Sofer, the Torah, a similar theme. There are 2 ways to relate to Limud HaTorah. You can relate to Limud HaTorah as data, information. I have that information, I will know how to put on the tefillin. I have that information, I will know how to keep a kosher kitchen. It's information which will affect my life. That's true. But Limud HaTorah, the act of learning Torah, is more than just data, information to instruct me. It is a prerequisite in Limud HaTorah. It has to be al manas lasos. You must translate it into action. But there's another dimension to Limud HaTorah. Limud HaTorah has to be an end in itself. It's not information in order to facilitate something else. It is that, but it's not just that. The act of learning Torah is a moment of spiritual connection with the Ribbono Shel Olam's thoughts, words, as we can access them on our level of existence. That was the point. That was the message of the messages of Maimed Har Sinai. And the moment of somebody's learning, that is a moment of spiritual connection to the Shekhinah. It has been said, I've seen various attributions for the source of it, but it has been said that tefillah, prayer, is when we speak to the Ribbono Shel Olam. Limud HaTorah is when the Ribbono Shel Olam speaks to us. All the nitty-gritty, all the cataloging of criteria for pots and pans and pits and plows, the Shekhinah is in those details is in that categorizing. And it's a moment of ascendancy. It's a moment of transportation. Somebody is lifted and elevated to a different space and a different place in his own existence. And so, if you relate to Torah as we are trying now to describe, so then it's an end. Gemara Menachos says, you don't make a bracha on something unless you're completing the experience right now. It's a total experience. It's oiver lasiyosin. It's happening now and it's complete. It's not wanting. So if Torah is merely a hechshe mitzvah, it's a preparation for gaining information, then not yet finished. But if it doesn't require a bracha, it doesn't deserve a bracha, but if the act of learning Torah, whoever I am, wherever I am, on the continuum, on that ladder, some beginning level, some middle level, some advanced level, because there's no sheer. We're dealing with the infinite. So if I relate to it as an experience that is the ultimate entering into the dialogue, to listen to the Rebbeinu Shloim's words, to have them become internalized, I become a different person. The act of learning has catapulted me. One way of describing that is, does it deserve a bracha or doesn't it deserve a bracha? If the end, the act of learning in and of itself, per se, is that kind of an experience, then it deserves a bracha. And so, we can understand in the light of that why Chazal require and expect of this mitzvah something that we don't expect of any other mitzvah, because it is unique. Gemara teaches, in Poga Boch Menubel Zeh, somebody's accosted by the Yetzer Hara, Moshcheo lebeis medrash, drag him to the beis medrash. Bo'osi Yetzer Hara, the Rebbeinu Shalom created the Yetzer Hara, the id, the evil inclination. Bo'osi Tavlin, and he created the antidote, Talmud Torah. So this mitzvah is being asked, required to be the sublimation, the displacement, replacement of the Yetzer Hara. It's not a mitzvah like all other mitzvahs. There's something unique. Perhaps that's why we make a bracha in the morning, va'arevna, that this mitzvah, before Birkos HaTorah, should be sweet. That the act of learning Torah should be sweet. Because we want to facilitate this dimension of Limud HaTorah, that it should be the sublimation for the Yetzer Hara. Again, we always work from the premise that any facet, aspect of human personality, it can't be erased. It can be channeled. It can find a new conduit of expression. Meshech Chochmah goes through that so meticulously in Mishchu Ukchu. Pull that same set that same sheep that was used for Avodah Zorah by the Mitzrim, and now use it for what? For a Korban Pesach. Same species. Why? Because there's a certain urgency in the makeup of the human personality, a need to translate idea into tangibility. It's because we're a mukov. We're a blend of soul and body. And we have to translate from one language to the other. And therefore we need experience. Things have to be concretized. Elsewhere, the Meshech Chochmah quotes Reb Sadia Gaon, who says, just like the Ribboni Shalom was the only one who can create yesh me'ayin, kreishu ex nihilo, something from nothing, similarly, only the Ribboni Shalom can create nothing from something. We can't make anything go away. We can manipulate, redirect it, find a positive. That's a mishchu ukhu. Perhaps the only way that can happen is when you have that perfect merging of mind and heart, body and soul. And that can only happen through Limud HaTorah. Through reconnecting to the source, to the Ribboni Shalom's plan. To reconnect and see where my place and my piece is in that Torah. And how am I going to find my way of expressing that which is unique to my neshama. V'sein chalkeinu b'saresecha. And so, even if there seemed to be so much that is negative in behavior, in a situation, the more deeply I penetrate Limud HaTorah, the more I'm going to have the bchira to be able to rearrange that kaleidoscope, to spin it, and to give it a new picture. There's the potential that is misused and abused, and then it can be captured, recaptured, and focused. And that's going to happen when we don't relate to Limud HaTorah as merely information. And so we make a brocha. V'arevno, there should be masikus, sweetness in this act of learning Torah as a facilitator for being able to give us the discipline. Of course, it's an informed discipline. So let's go back now. We said that perhaps the difference between the Panovich Arov's case from Micha, that Yomim Boim, Num Hashem, days are coming where there'll be a hunger and a thirst for spirituality. Panovich Arov said that anybody that's ever seen a famine sees people picking on the rinds and the peels. That's why it's negative. It can be a thirst for spirituality. What a wonderful slogan, Tikkun Ha'olam. But as long as it remains an amorphous, undefined slogan, then it's like buy Coca-Cola. Yeah, but how? And what do I do about it? What about Tikkun me? Me. Isn't that where it begins? So as long as it's vague, undefined, unspecified, as long as it doesn't get into the nitty-gritty of the pots and pans, right, the pits and the plows, so then the sloganeer is safe, because there's nothing he has to do tomorrow morning when he wakes up in the morning, or there's nothing he shouldn't do that he wants to do, because we're living in a world that's been psychologized, right? It's all a community of language. This is how you say it, this is how I say it, some of us agree. It has nothing to do with inherent reality of truth, of meaning. So, flavors. You like vanilla, I like chocolate. Well, find a modus operandi not to interfere with each other too much. But for 3,000 years, we've been claiming, arguing, demonstrating that there is an objective reality. Do we escape the subjective? No. I would think that that's one of the ways to understand the Loshen and Tilim by Hinoyim Hashem Elokecha Aleinu. It should be pleasant to us. To us, should work, fit, suitable, and then only afterwards kondanehu to the Rebbeinu Shalom. Surely we encounter the world subjectively through our senses, through our filtering machines called brains and hearts, how to sift and sort and organize the information, and how to relate to it. But then a step further. What's the objective truth that lurks behind it all, that hovers over it all, and that ultimately makes it matter with a capital M? Either the matter with a small m matters with a capital M, or it doesn't. If it's merely subjective, material, more complex, so that matter with a small m doesn't matter with an M. You're here for the ride. And so, but there's a reality. There's a reality of who we are and what we are. And it doesn't go away. That is our initial encounter with the world. It takes time till the infant differentiates between that which is him and isn't him, and that there are others. Pasuk we read this morning said that ubikashtan misham es Hashem Elokecha matzasi, you will find. Kisidashena bechol levovecha, you'll seek with your entire heart. We contrasted that with vayeshotu, drifting. That's lelo omo, without effort, without toil, without yegiyah, without amelis. When that becomes internalized in the person, b'chol livovacho, two basin. Not b'chol libecho, b'chol livovacho. Also with the Yetzer Hara. Capture, harness that energy and use it l'toiv. Otherwise it's not going to work. That exhilaration of the imagination, it adds that dimension. Beis HaLevi says something fascinating. He says that Shalei holchu bo, they didn't go in the way, that's why they didn't make Birkas HaTorah. Says the Beis HaLevi, they sat and learned in the Beis Medrash, they had a Seder, and then they went out to do business. They had their day of activity. It wasn't a continuity of the Beis Medrash. Shalei holchu bo. Their activity outside the Beis Medrash wasn't informed, wasn't suffused with their sensitivities of the Beis Medrash. That's a Shalei holchu bo. That's not Torah. Then you were studying a subject. I would make the case perhaps that that's possibly what David HaMelech is alluding to. Chishafti is drochai. Started calculating, thinking about his ways. He's on his way to the restaurant, and he says, "Shiva es raglai elei vosech," and then he turns around and goes to the Beis Medrash. That's the way most people learn it. I think there's another dimension to what David HaMelech is saying. He's saying what the Beis HaLevi is saying. I thought that perhaps when I was going out to get that pizza, it was a hefsek. And then I said, no, there's a way that a Ben Torah buys a pizza. There's a way a Ben Torah eats a pizza. There's a way a Ben Torah goes shopping. There's a way he indulges in recreation. Because it's healthy. It's healthy. But there's a way. Still remember the first week I came to Baltimore from New York, went out to play basketball in the Y with the fellows from the yeshiva, mostly those years from the Midwest, the South. There were, I'd say, less than a third were New Yorkers. We're playing basketball, choose-up game in the Y, and I'm under the boards, and I'm elbowing for position and pushing. One of these Midwesterners looks at me and says, "What are you doing?" I looked at him. I was shocked. I said to him, "What do you think this is, a game?" I'm from New York. It's war. Everything is war. Driving is war. Basketball is war. Baseball is war. It's one conflict. It's one confrontation. It takes time till you come to the realization that when you internalize the ideas of Torah, yes, kines seifrim tabas chochma, there is a competitiveness can be harnessed. We know that. We know the Chazalim that teach us the process, but we know where it has to get to. Kinship, bonding. And if there is a way of applying a remedy to sinas chinam, then it's learning. Because the more we learn, the more we understand that we're part of Klal Yisrael, that we need each other, that we're part of history. We're connecting to a past, to the Ovos, to the Imois, and amazingly enough, that's also implied in the Tisha B'Av. Medrash says, "Hisbiani b'marorim." They became sated. B'marorim is a reference to Moro and the Lana, to the Tisha B'Av. We know that the day in which that we fix the same night of the week as that's the Leil Seder, is the night of Tisha B'Av. According to some minhagim, the Ramah brings it. According to some minhagim, that's why we have the beitzah, the egg dipped in the salt water, is to make that connection. Anything that's cylindrical is reminiscent of the cycle of human existence, the egg. And that's Tisha B'Av. It seems to be out of joint. But we touched on this in the past, maybe elaborated more. We'll just glimpse now. Dominant number in the Haggadah is 4. There's a 4-ness about the Haggadah. The Bonim, the Kashas, the Lashenis Agula, the Kaisis, it's 4. 4 is the Imois, the matriarchs. The Ovos were 3. Shlomo HaMelech says, Shma b'nei Musa avicha, listen to the Musa, the ethic of your father. Al titosh, don't abandon the Torah of your mother. It would seem that if you're just passive, you're not doing anything to extricate the Torah of your mother from yourself, it's there. As long as you don't take the initiative to extricate it. Musa avicha, you have to pay attention. It's outside you, it has to come in. Jews in Mitzrayim were in fact in a similar state. They had Jewish identity, still honored the sensitivity to Jewish family. But they were serving idolatry in Mitzrayim. Yeah, but that remained. The moistika, the minimal mode of the matriarchal syndrome. I'm Jewish because my mother was a Jewess. The halachic ger is another discussion. Some would even make the case those are neshamas, and we have makoros for that got lost in Golos along the way. Of course, it needs the halachic process of gerus. But essentially, I'm a Jew because my mother was Jewish. Fast forward, we read today, Yirmiyahu Navi said in Eicha, "V'hayinu ki yaseimim ein ov." We were like orphans without a father. Didn't have Musa avicha. But one could deduce a mother was. There was minimal Jewishness. In the worst matzovim, by Yetzias Mitzrayim, we're being told there are going to be peaks and valleys in the graph of the spiritual bull markets and bear markets of Jewish history. But at the worst times, there will be a core, thriving sense of Jewish identity that will be enough of a bridge to keep us connected to the next door. Otherwise, we wouldn't make it through the bear markets. And so, when the pasuk we read today, that's a kind of a nechama. And we're being told that Pesach at night. Yes, it's festive. It's great, but part of the festivity is to know that I'm going to survive the most challenging of times. That's part of the festivity, that my progeny will continue to the finish line in history. Perhaps that's alluded to also. Interesting range of opinions. Posuk says, "Ubikashtem mishom es Hashem lokecha umatzosa." Bikashtem is Loshen Rabbi. You will search, you will seek. Loshen Rabbi, plural. Umatzosa is Loshen Yochid. So the Nesivis says, like the Ponevezher Rov seems to say, many will search, ubikashtem, umatzosa, but only individuals will find. Why? Because they took the governor off the accelerator. They went in to buy. They didn't just go window shopping. It wasn't just via Shota. Others say that bikashtem, everybody starts from his own personal biography and impetus in his life. Different starting points from all over the globe and all over the span of possible ideological interest sensitivities. Umatzosa, but when you find the emes, we come together. We are united. We come together. That'll be the ultimate tikkun. Togetherness doesn't mean homogenization. It means pasteurization. We want to eliminate the negative elements, but not to smooth it out such that there's no individuality. That always has to remain. Benisham should give us the koyach. I'll end with this. Famous Schiller, Chazal say, they call him a Sabal al-Yerushalayim, anybody that mourns for Yerushalayim, Zoche is merits, Veroe and sees B'simchoso. It's simcha. Shouldn't it be Yizke V'yira in the future tense? Right now we're mourning. Just a few minutes ago we were still sitting on the floor and we're still not eating. We're still not celebrating. Said Reb Chaim Volozhiner that the Rebbeinu Shalom fixed in creation that somebody, lo aleinu, kin, die, messes nishkach min alev, it gets forgotten eventually. Otherwise we couldn't go on living. It's a chesed from the Rebbeinu Shalom. In fact, it also says that we take that chesed and we use it to forget the giver of the chesed. Unfortunately. But if we're still mourning, then it means it's still alive. It hasn't ceased. It hasn't stopped to exist. And perhaps that's in fact where we began. That Zos oshiv el libi al kein ochil. The very fact that I am mourning is testimony that it's alive. And that there are botim midroshim with Jesus sitting on the floor. Depending on their clock, some have gotten up already and some didn't yet get up. But all over the world, wherever Jews have been dispersed in Golas, Chadoshim Labkorim, dispersed, diaspora, but they continue to mourn, and that is the bittersweet message that that very mourning is in and of itself the requirement, the possibility, the responsibility to have a certain sense of joy, of simcha, that we can and do continue to be in a state of avelus. Ben Hashem should translate our kinnis, our tefillas, our thoughts and attempts to try and share sensitivities of Torah, to listen to the Rebbeinu Shlomo's word, to experience that elevation and to that moment of connecting to the sublime and supreme simcha.